So I picked this one green vegetable. I thought it was an asparagus, and it turned out to be a green chili pepper. I ate it whole. I can still taste it. Okay, thank you for your patience. So today we're going to talk about what if people weren't the product. You may have heard that phrase before. If you are not paying for anything, then you are the product. Let's talk about changing that a little. So my name is David Dillon Thomas, and I run a company where I get people more excited about and give them better tools for more inclusive design. And I wrote a book called Design for Cognitive Bias. And I'm going to give you a spoiler alert. The book ends with this quote from Martin Luther King. We must rapidly begin the shift from a thing-oriented society to a person-oriented society, when machines and computers, profit motives, and property rights are considered more important than people. The giant triplets of racism, materialism, and militarism are incapable of being conquered. Now, for the purposes of this talk, I want to focus on this first sentence. We must rapidly begin the shift from a thing-oriented society to a person-oriented society. Now, Martin Luther King said this over 50 years ago, so the boat has sailed on the rapidly part, but if we can agree that it's a good idea to go from a thing-oriented society to a person-oriented society, I have one question for all of us. What is our role in that shift as designers, as project managers, as artists, as just human beings? What is our role in that shift? Now, to go on that journey, we are going to talk about genocide. We are going to see some examples of hate speech. I wanted to prepare you for that. But first, I want to talk about how the mirror ruined everything. So if you go far enough back, the only way to see what you looked like is to just happen upon a still body of water, like our friend Narcissus here. I'm sure that'll go well for him. But other than that, you may go your whole life never knowing what your face looks like, right? And this had a profound effect on people's sense of identity. Then eventually we get to a point where we can reliably reproduce mirrors. You can see what you look like pretty regularly. And this has a profound effect on identity. Morris Berman, a historian, says we find a sharp simultaneous increase in self-awareness and in the quantity and technical quality of mirror reproduction. Prior to this, the idea of the self wasn't as much of a thing. So what does that look like? We start to see an increase in self-portraiture, right? Which makes sense. You know, if I can see myself, I can paint myself. But we also see an increase in first-person novels, which we probably should have had that already, right? I mean, the technology for that was already there. We had the word I, but suddenly it's now when we start to really use it. We also see an increase in books on etiquette, because with a mirror, I can see what I look like to myself, but I can also see what I look like to other people. And suddenly I'm getting self-conscious. Now, something else comes along with the invention of the mirror. An increase in standing armies. Because it isn't just people who can see what they look like to other people. Nation states can start to see what they look like to other nation states. And maybe they look like a tasty treat. So maybe instead of having to raise an army every single time I go to war, let's just have one lying around. Now, that's what we get from a mirror we see maybe once or twice a day. But what if the entire world were mirrors? Well, online, that's basically true. I defy you to go to a single website today that isn't customized to your needs, right? And the version of Facebook that you see is different from the version of Facebook that I see. Now, it was not always thus, right? If you go far enough back in the history of the web, there's no personalization, right? Every website, it's basically a very weird art gallery, and people are just putting stuff out there. And the version of Homestar Runner that you see is the version of Homestar Runner that I see, right? To its credit, Homestar Runner to this day has no logged-in state, so God bless them. And some of the result of this is that we start to see ourselves as advertisers see us, because the data that's being used to personalize those sites, the version of ourselves reflected to us, is data that advertisers are interested in, because, well, that's how we funded the personalization in the first place. So we start to see ourselves kind of the way advertisers do, as products. Here I am on Instagram. Look at me. I'm in Berlin, sipping a cappuccino. Aren't I cool? And I am sort of like marketing myself, right? And the same filters that we use on Instagram to make ourselves look good are the same filters that marketers use to make their products look good. And Facebook knows this is a bad idea. Their own research showed that when girls would productize themselves in their Instagram feeds and compared themselves to other girls who were productizing themselves, it resulted in massive mental health and body dysmorphia issues. So you might wonder, okay, why am I so riled up about personalization? Well, part of it is that personalization is usually done in the interest of something called engagement. Now, what exactly is engagement? I mean, I don't think we're talking about anyone getting married here. We're not talking about anyone, trying to meet up, right? But more important than engagement is how we measure it, right? ENPS, likes, and comments. And engagement itself ends up becoming a very deceptive metric. So this is probably one of the worst graphs I've ever seen in my life. It's called the natural engagement pattern. And what it shows is, and this was produced by Facebook in 2018, and what it shows is as we go from allowed content to prohibited content, so allowed content might be, cat videos and such, to prohibited content, misinformation and hate speech, engagement skyrockets. Now think about that for a second. If you're in the business of attracting ad dollars, and ad dollars are attracted to engagement, and engagement goes up when there's misinformation and hate speech, to some degree you are now in the business of misinformation and hate speech. I had a friend who used to work for Facebook, and she was in charge of tracking down misinformation. And one of the key signals that a piece of content was misinformation was how many times it was shared. The more times it was shared, the more likely it was to be misinformation. Our research suggests that no matter where we draw the lines for what is allowed, as a piece of content gets close to that line, people will engage with it more on average, even when they tell us afterwards they don't like the content. Now, the only thing more galling than this statement is who said it. Zuck knew all of this. And this can have tragic consequences. 10,000 Rohingya Muslims were killed during a military crackdown in Buddhist-majority Myanmar in 2017. The survivors sued Facebook because of their involvement in the genocide. They also wrote an open letter to Facebook along with the lawsuit. The open letter said that Facebook's algorithms amplified hate speech against the Rohingya people. And again, remember, what increases engagement? The firm failed to invest in moderators and fact-checkers who knew about the political situation in Myanmar. This was an open secret. All they had to do was ask one or two people. They would know what the impact of that hate speech would be. By the way, remember what Elon Musk did the second he bought Twitter. He fired all of the content moderators. The company failed to take down posts or delete accounts that incited violence against the Rohingya. And when you see some of these posts, you will be shocked that they weren't taken down immediately. The lawsuit itself says that they were willing to trade the lives of the Rohingya people for better market penetration in a small country in Southeast Asia. And Facebook admitted it. They said, yeah, we were involved in this. This is one of the statements that was posted to Facebook and not taken down. And this is another. No, seriously, fuck engagement. Now, if that is what a thing-oriented web gets us, what might a person-oriented web get us? Well, to do that, I want to talk about the Siksika. This is a First Nation in the Americas. You can find it around the Montana, Alberta area. They're part of the Blackfoot Confederacy. And they came on my radar because of this guy. Does anybody know who this guy is? How about now? This is Abraham Maslow of Maslow's Hierarchy of Needs, a very popular pop psychology concept that basically says, as human beings, we have all these different needs. It could be physical security, it could be love, and the way it's been presented is a little misleading. First of all, he never intended it for it to be a triangle, right? That was actually a marketer and a business consultant who came up with that later. And he also never intended to look like these are things that we level up on. Like once we've got the security, then we start thinking about love. Then maybe later we start thinking about self-actualization, right? He thought we were pursuing all 5 needs at the same time all the time. It's just that more of us had gotten the physical security down, a few less than that the love, and maybe 10% of any given population had achieved that higher level of self-actualization. So he's working on this, and he has a friend who's living with a Siksika, and he says, Maslow, you should come out here. I think living in this village for a while will help you with your theory. So he does, and one of the things he notices is that it isn't 10% of the Siksika who are self-actualized. It's all of them. The white people in the village, on the other hand, the more I got to know the whites in the village, who were the worst bunch of creeps and bastards I'd ever run across in my life, the more it got paradoxical. So what's going on here? Well, first off, the Siksika probably wouldn't use a term like self-actualized. They might use a term more like nitapatapi, which means someone who is completely developed, someone who has arrived. And importantly, they don't believe you got there by going on some vision quest or struggling or going through some kind of harshness. They believed you were born nitapatapi. You were born that way. Now think about the profound effect that has on almost every level of life. Parenting. I don't need to be really strict with you and make you good. You're already good. I just need to make sure you don't get eaten by a bear, or maybe teach you how to fish. So parenting becomes very permissive. Crime. You didn't commit that crime because you're evil and need to be locked away or maybe even killed. No, you're nitapatapi. We need to figure out why you committed that crime, and maybe there's some things you need to change, but maybe there's some things we need to change. But my favorite is what this does to the idea of wealth. For the Blackfoot, wealth was not measured by money and property, but by generosity. The wealthiest man in their eyes is one who has almost nothing because he has given it all away. And they would have giving circles every year. They'd get around in a circle and say, how much did you give? Oh, you gave that much? Oh, you win. Now, I want you to imagine you're playing a video game, and the only way you can advance in this game isn't to get points, it's to give them away. What are you going to spend most of your time in that game doing? Looking for people to give your points to. And as a result, Maslow had a hard time finding poverty in that village. Because the second somebody was down on their luck, the whole village would swoop in and try to make them whole. So what would it look like if we built the web based on the assumption that everyone is good and worth helping, not just the ones who can give us their data, not just the ones who can pay us directly? Now, an illusion about the Enlightenment is that it was a bunch of European dudes wake up one morning and say, hey, you know what's awesome? Reason. As it turns out, one of the core influences on the Enlightenment came from discourse between Native American and European intellectuals. This is one of those Native American intellectuals. His name is Kondironk. And he was a Wendat strategist in the 1600s. The Wendat, imagine living around the area in Lake Huron in Canada. So he meets a French lieutenant named Frontenac, and Frontenac is super impressed with Kondironk's intellect, his debate skills, and Frontenac has all of his officers come meet at his house to debate Kondironk and lose. Kondironk wipes the floor with them. And this discourse at somebody's house starts to become one of the influences for the salon in Europe. So part of the discourse is something called the indigenous critique of European living. And Kondironk has a take on this. And the critique goes something like this. I don't understand why you Europeans are making yourselves miserable going after wealth. And I've seen it. You are miserable. Is it because you think wealth is going to give you power, right? Make people like you, make people do what you say? And the reason that doesn't make any sense to Kondironk is because where he's from, even if you have wealth, nobody does what you say. They won't do what you say if you pay them. They won't do what you say if you're nominally their chief. The only way to get someone to do what you want, where Condirong comes from, is to convince them it's a good idea, which is why Condirong is so good at debate. It's the only way to get anything done. So he's baffled by this, but he's also baffled by something else. For my own part, I find it hard to see how you could be much more miserable than you already are. What kind of human, what species of creature must Europeans be that they have to be forced to do good and only refrain from evil because of fear of punishment? Because again, where Condirong's from, you do good because it's good. He has a theory about this, though. I have spent 6 years reflecting on the state of European society, and I still can't think of a single way they act that's not inhuman. He really didn't hold back. And I genuinely think this can only be the case as long as you stick to your distinctions of mine and thine. And the penny drops. Now, what does having a distinction between mine and thine have to do with being forced to do good? Well, in The Dawn of Everything, David Graeber and David Wengrow have this to say: the whole apparatus of trying to force people to behave well would be unnecessary if France did not also maintain a contrary apparatus that encourages people to behave badly. Now, what might that apparatus be? Maybe capitalism? Capitalism says, hey, come on out, make money, it's awesome. People are going to do what you say. You're going to have so much cool stuff. Just make as much money as you can. Oh, you know what, though? Oh, okay, hold on. Don't steal anything, right? I get how you thought if you steal something, you'll have more stuff. Okay, no, we'll kill you if you do that. No, do that. But definitely make, oh, you know what? Don't kill anybody. Okay, yeah, I get how you think if you kill somebody, you can take all their stuff, and I get, no, don't do that either. Oh, right, slavery. Okay. Let us get back to you on that one. So, this is Facebook's stock price between 2012 and 2022. And this is when the genocide happened. What did the stock do? A contrary apparatus. Now, I wrote a book about bias, so a lot of people ask me, hey, Dave, what's your favorite bias? And I'm like, hey, did you actually read the book? But I do have a least favorite bias. It's called the just world hypothesis. And the just world hypothesis goes something like this. We live in a just world. Good things happen to good people, bad things happen to bad people. And if anything bad ever happens to you, it's probably your fault, right? And this does a lot of heavy lifting. And it results in this kind of thinking, especially in the States, where the whole entire premise is that it doesn't matter who your parents are, right? That's some European stuff. No, over here, you make your own destiny. You're responsible. But the flip side of that is you're also responsible if you're hurting. So are you sick? I guess you didn't take good care of yourself. Are you poor? Yeah, I guess you're kind of lazy. Did somebody do something terrible to you? Yeah, but did you kind of ask for it? Right? All these horrible kind of justifications for horrible things come out of this hypothesis. And this hypothesis does a lot of heavy lifting, right? It gives you a sense of security, a sense of control. Because nothing bad can ever happen to me as long as I'm a good person and I work really hard and I do my 80 hours and I hustle, right? There's no big bad system out there. There's no tech giant that's just going to lay people off arbitrarily. No, it's all down to me. The other thing it does is it helps you not care about anybody else, right? If you see somebody else suffering, you can tell yourself, well, that's their fault. And I actually shouldn't help them. If I help them, I'm actually going to make it worse, right? Another thing that this bias allows us to do is to not think about systems, because if it's all down to me, there is no system in control of my destiny. I'm in control of my destiny, right? And that's very helpful, because if we think about systems for long enough, we start to realize they're corrupt. We feel obligated then to do something about them. And that can be very, very scary. Now, there are in fact people out there who are thinking about systems, and I'm going to tell you about one of them. This is Will Reynolds. He runs Sear Interactive, a search optimization company in Philadelphia. And he made a couple interesting choices. One thing he did was to make the custodial staff full-time employees. So generally speaking in America, if you're working in an office and somebody's cleaning and maintaining that office, they are not employees of that company. They are employees of a third-party company that your boss employs to clean that place. And I'm going to tell you right now that third-party company does not have health care. So Will takes a look at this and says, you know what? These folks who are cleaning and maintaining this office are contributing to the success of our company, just like our sales staff, just like our developers. So why shouldn't they have access to the gym, have a 401k? So he makes them full-time employees. Now they get all those benefits. Another thing he does is he creates a 65K salary floor. Now why does he do that? Well, just go on the website. It says right there, we believe everyone, regardless of role level, deserves to make a livable wage. Does that sound familiar? Everyone is born nita patapi, even if it's higher than market ranges, which is why Sears' livable wage is 31% above market ranges. Now, Will is the last person on earth who would call himself an anti-capitalist. However, that is a very anti-capitalist move. Why? Well, I'm no economist, but I'm pretty sure one of the core tenets of capitalism is that the market decides the value. Will said no. Human dignity is going to decide the value, and that value happens to be 31% higher than what the market says it is. Now, I can't tell you why Will does what he does, but I can tell you that in 2019, I hit a turning point. In 2019, I was diagnosed with clinical depression and anxiety. And I got on the meds, I got on the therapy, and I gotta tell you, it's the best choice I ever made. And one of the first questions we tackled when I was in therapy is this: am I a good person? And the reason we did that is because I would go into every single interaction as if I were on trial. And at the end of that trial, depending on how that interaction went, I would be declared, yeah, you're a good person. Or if it went badly, oh, you're a terrible person. The jury's in. You're horrible. Now, as it turns out, outsourcing your self-worth is not a good idea. So we decided to focus on a different question. Am I getting closer to my values? I have values: compassion, connection, curiosity. In these interactions, am I getting closer to those values or further away? Now, that's a much more reasonable and actually easier to answer question, and a healthier question. And I literally made a Trello, listed out my values, and I can come back to them, and they actually become a really strong way to make decisions, right? Which choice is more compassionate? Which choice is more likely to lead to connection? So we saw what Will Reynolds is willing to leave money on the table for, where his values are. What are the things you are willing to leave money on the table for? What are the things your company is willing to leave money on the table for? What are the things your shareholders are willing to leave money on the table for? Is there anything your shareholders are willing to leave money on the table for? The shorter that list is, the more unethical your company might be. So let's bring it on home. We must assume that it is good to be connected to the land, to the people, and to our values. Right now, we do not. We only connect to things that will make us money. We've built a web that is indifferent to the land, indifferent to the people, and indifferent to ourselves. We must do better, and I believe that we can do better. What if the web reflected back to me was the real me, right? The things I believed in. What if the thing that followed me around the web wasn't some ad for something I bought 2 weeks ago, but my values? Hey, Dave, remember, you're compassionate. Hey, Dave, remember, you love connection. What if the web reflected back to me was the land where I live? By the way, the more time people spend in nature, the smaller they make themselves in selfies. Just seems relevant. What if the web reflected back to me was people I can help? A friend of mine the other day is ordering from Grubhub, and his daughter says, well, while we're ordering for ourselves, what if we order something for that person down the street that doesn't have a place to live? And I'm like, yeah, why don't you? And Grubhub, why didn't you tell me about that? What kind of a web would Condiranc's assumptions build? What kind of a web would Siksika assumptions build? And why is it Tumblr? So we don't have time to get into it now, and I'd love to talk to you about it after, but Tumblr is kind of an idealization of the way I think the web might work, that person-oriented web. The short version of it is Twitter is like stand-up. Hey, Look how clever I am. Look how I put that guy down, right? Look how smart I am. And Tumblr's a little more like improv. Oh, that is a weird thing you posted. Let me post something even weirder. Let me build on that. So after this talk, after you get back to your hotel room, I want you to get a piece of paper and a pencil, and I want you to write down what you believe in. What are those things that when you're doing them, you are showing the world who you really are, the real you? What are those few things you get to care about? Then I want you to ask yourself if the things you're doing are getting you closer to those values or further away. And if they're getting you further away, how might you get just a little bit closer? And then for all of us, I want us to co-imagine the future with people hurt by the present. All these forces I'm asking you to fight, these kind of oppressive forces, were once just ideas, right? Patriarchy was some idea that somebody came up with, and it caught on, and it kind of made the world a worse place. But then everybody is born Nita Patapi was also just an idea, and it caught on, and it made the world a better place. So what I'm going to ask you is, what's your idea? Now, when I first wrote this talk, I was like, yeah, man, that's it, mic drop. What's your idea? But the more I thought about it, the more I realized this is just the long way back around to personalization. It was kind of an empty question. So I want to end on a more difficult, but I think a more meaningful question. What's our idea? What's the idea we come up with together, right? And not just the people in this room, but the people outside this room who might have been hurt by design, maybe even some of our designs. Because that's the idea that's really going to change the world. Thank you.
I think we need a much bigger round of applause. This was such a great start to DesignUp. Thank you so much, David. What better way to start a design conference than really question, what are we doing? Is this the only way? And I'm really excited. We have some time for Q&A, and I wanted to get people in the mood of asking hard questions to David, because he's been asking hard questions to us. But I'll probably kick it off first, David. A lot of us are just designers. So much of what you're saying is much harder because our world is in Figma, in the work that we're doing. How does one comprehend the reality of what the world is, what are we doing as a company, when our roles are just a designer? What advice do you give to people?
So this is a shorter version of a talk that I've given a few times, and in the longer version, I do sort of address that. You know, I talk about Will Reynolds and the moves he's making, and a valid critique is, well, he's a CEO, he can do whatever he wants. There's another guy I talk about who is an individual contributor, right? He works at Google, and one day he went to a Black Lives Matter rally in Oakland, and he came home and he wrote the black-owned business attribute in Google Maps, and it's still there today, right? So even as an individual contributor, he found a way to add one little thing to the larger platform that might be helpful socially. So I think that's part of it, but the other thing I don't want us to lose sight of is that we shouldn't just think of ourselves as individual contributors. We are part of a community. I mean, look around this room right now. There are many of us. We are many, they are few. We're stronger together. So I would say the other thing to do is look to your allies, identify those allies, identify the people who feel the same way you do, who have some of the same frustrations. Because one of you might be able to make a little dent, two of you might be able to make a little bit bigger dent, but once it starts to become 10, 20, 30, 100, 1,000, right, you can start to see how you can start to make certain demands that cannot be ignored, even by the powerful. So I would say, think about those little moves you can make personally, but also think about the larger community and what you can do together, because that is always going to be more powerful.
Wonderful. Yeah, thank you for that. I'm going to try and see if there are questions for David. I would love to see if there are questions and not comments. Try and keep your questions short and crisp. I can see one hand raised there. I can see one hand raised there. I think we have some folks running around with mics. Can we get a mic over there, please? We have a lady in a gray jacket over there. Yeah. When you're asking your question, tell us your name, maybe where you work, and then ask the question.
Hi, David. It's nice to meet you. I am Anushri from JP Morgan Chase. David, you spoke about Nita Pitapi and patriarchy just being ideas, just starting out as ideas, right? But one caught on like wildfire, and the other one did not spread beyond, say, like a small landmass. Why do you think that patriarchy, which is, and I'm making a big assumption here, it's the negative idea, caught on so quickly and is still existing, and Nita Pitapi, probably none of us had ever heard of?
So if I'm understanding your question correctly, you're sort of asking about like scaling, right, of sort of Nita Patapi ideas versus patriarchal ideas. So I am only semi-educated in this, and I would highly encourage you to read a book called Dawn of Everything that really gets into more detail about this. But my understanding is Nita Patapi is actually more robust than patriarchy. It went on for 10,000 years at least, and scaled to the size of at least all of North America, if not South America as well. And again, in different pockets in Asia, even some pockets in Europe. This idea of basically being born worthy, right? Just a fundamental assumption that all people are born worthy, rather than when you're born, it's now a race to the top. You got to prove, why are you here? I'll feed you for a while you're a baby, but once you're of working age, okay, get out, do it on your own, otherwise you're not worth anything. That really, as a codified experience, again, from my understanding, is relatively recent. I mean, even the invention of money itself is relatively recent, but the idea of capital as a way to create monetary value, we'll put it that way, is relatively recent. Let's say the past 500 years, if we're being generous, maybe 5,000 years, but again, that's nothing compared to the scale of human existence. And while that has been a very powerful motivator, largely it's been by force. It sort of gets forced on cultures. There's a great quote from a Native American who said, "I'm so glad the Europeans gave us laws, but because before that we didn't have crime. I'm so glad the Europeans gave us money, because before that we didn't have poverty," right? So these cultures existed for a very long time, but because of a combination of disease and just inferior weaponry, if you will, they were basically forced out. It was a hostile takeover. So I struggle with that. I struggle with, even if we were to get back to a sort of state of mass adoption of this Nita Patapi concept, are we just one invasion away from it all being taken away again? And the answer is, I don't know. But what gives me hope, at least, is knowing that as human beings, because the folks I'm talking about, the Blackfoot, we're not like aliens. They're same blood as you and me, same DNA as you and me. Human beings are capable of living together like this for long periods of time, but how we go from where we are now to that, I honestly don't know. But I would like to see it happen.
Thank you so much.
Sure.
I saw that there was one question on that side. I see a hand raised. Can you stand up, please, so we can get you a mic?
Also, I like being able to walk the entire length of the stage, because I'm like, this is too big a stage to just sit in one spot. I want to like run around.
Again, tell us your name, tell us where you're from, and keep your questions short.
Hi, my name is Varun. I'm from Thrissur, but that's not what you meant, right? I'm not from Adobe, but I work with Adobe. Dylan, I loved your talk. I wasn't expecting the starting of this conference to be, I don't know, so meaningfully inspiring. So thank you so much. One thing that's on my mind is, I'm sure many of us, if not most of us, are really inspired with this and taking back a little bit of fire from your talk. But how do we keep this fire burning? And rather than it being a talk I enjoyed one day, to it's easy to forget this, right? Because this is not a common narrative we get around us. So what are the ways we keep this thread intact within us and slowly allow it to rise into action in some way?
Sure. So I'm going to let you know a little secret. My job model, my business model, if you will, is to go in and rabble-rouse, like exactly what you said. I'm here to light a fire under you. And then there are other people whose job is to take that fire and actually operationalize it. And this goes way back for me, right? I'm a content strategist. I was a consultant. So my job would be to go into your company and be like, oh, this content's a mess, this organization's a mess, let me get it all clean, let me give you a plan, right, for getting it all cleaned up. Okay, here's your plan, good luck. right? So, and then someone else would operationalize it, right? So this is a long-winded way of me saying I'm not an expert on how to operationalize it. There are people who are, but what I would say, what keeps the fire lit for me is I need something to do with the outrage, right? Maybe I shouldn't, but I do look at the newspaper every morning, and I'm like, oh my God. Like, I go through this, like, what I call a, like there's a hype cycle, there's a hope cycle, where it's like, okay, maybe things are gonna be okay, open the paper, oh my God. Why don't the aliens just come destroy us now, please, please, just, and, but then I sort of get into my work and I'm like, okay, well, like, what are people doing out there that is actually working? I make sure I have a bad news feed, but I also make sure I have a good news feed. And the truth is, a lot of really good stuff has been happening environmentally. We've seen advances, ridiculous advances in lots of countries nobody likes to talk about, but they're there. And lots of medical advances. Like, did you know we cured blindness? How many people know that? Like, genetic blindness. If you're born blind, we actually can cure that now. Yeah, exactly. Nobody talks about it. So, like, there is stuff happening out there, and I'm like, okay, if the people on the ground doing the work can do the work with far less resources than I, then I can keep doing what I'm doing. And again, I have my niche. I'm a filmmaker too, so I'm like out here trying to make this film and literally trying to preserve history as it's being taken away from American monuments right now and finding ways to do that in my work. So I think part of the answer with how do you keep that fire going is you stay awake. Right? And you say, okay, well, that fire now, you have to find a thing, whether it's filmmaking, art, getting together with other people, dare I say it, unionizing, but doing some kind of organization where you get people together that gives you something to do with that fire, do with that rage. Because you're right, if it just sits there as a fire, it'll go out eventually. But if you have something to apply it to, I'm going to stretch the metaphor, something to heat the fire with, something to cook the fire with, go with me here, then it's much more likely to stay alive, and you have a reason to keep it alive. So, like, find something, I don't know what it is, find something to apply that fire to, and it's much more likely to stay lit.
And I would say we have about 1,000 designers under a single roof. Maybe there are 1 to 5 folks here who want to try and start curating some of these examples. So, hopefully, over the years, we see a lot more. I think we have time for one last question. So I'm going to see, I see somebody in the center. Can you stand up, please? And we will try and get you a mic. And keep your questions short so we can get this answered.
Hey, David. It's Astha here. I'm actually a student. I'm studying in Bangalore, design. I'll keep my questions short. Listening to your talk, it really made me question my faith. But with the example of the custodial staff you mentioned, I would like to ask you, how have we reached a point where our worth feels measured by what we are consuming?
Did you say, are we at a point where our work is measured by...
Our worth.
Our worth is measured by what?
By what we are consuming and what we are being consumed by.
Yes. I mean, sadly, yes. I think that. So I think what you're saying, if I'm understanding correctly, is are we at a point where our worth is measured by what we consume and how we're consuming? I think so. And again, if you look at, again, I didn't have time for this, but is that what you're asking? How do we get here? Oh, okay. Oh my, step by step. So I think that, again, I'm not a historian exactly, but from what I've learned, my perception is that we had different parts of the world living in lots of different ways. And around the late 1400s, early 1500s, one way started to dominate. A host of Europeans across the Atlantic, basically trying to beat out different groups, mostly Muslim, that were finding trade routes to China and the rest of the East, and basically were looking for another way to basically beat them out competitively. They ended up coming to America. And basically, in order to justify stealing everything, they sort of said, okay, well, the people over here, they're not really people, so it's not stealing, it's not killing, it's just, there was a papal bull. The Pope basically said, look, your duty as a Christian is to go over here and either convert them or kill them, right? So you end up with this extremely traumatic event to all of the Western Hemisphere. Something like 90% of the Western Hemisphere gets wiped out. And that we're even at the level we are now after something as tragic as that. Some days I'm impressed. Because that's a horrific thing to do and justify. And we tell ourselves a story, and in order to be able to do something that bad, we tell ourselves a story that some people are just better than others, right? And maybe I feel bad about what happened to them, but if they were stronger, they would have beat me, so it's cool. That narrative, again, to oversimplify greatly, that narrative really caught on. And it caught on so well that even the people they were repressing sometimes believed it. And were like, well, I guess I got beat. I guess you are better. I guess I'll just carve out what I can, or I'll try really hard to be like you. So the really short answer to that question is this new way of thinking came into existence, justified itself, and just kept repeatedly just hitting and hitting and hitting, and kept acquiring wealth, making it really hard to stop. But the other side of that coin is we have been fighting ever since. We are still here. You, me, everybody in this room who's not a trillionaire right now, the fact that we're still here, that's amazing. And the fact that we're still fighting and the world hasn't been completely overrun and that it's basically been a pendulum for about 300 years, that's amazing. And that's honestly what gives me hope, is that, like, A, there are more of us than there are of them, and B, I truly believe if there is such a thing as our true nature, it leans way more towards kindness. And I'll close with this. We keep building hospitals. Oh, is that the music playing me off stage? We keep building hospitals. Think about it. Why do we keep building hospitals? Because we actually do think it's worth saving lives. We don't look at people who are hurt and say, oh, you're too weak, good luck. No, we human beings on the whole actually want to help other people far more than they want to hurt other people. So I'll leave on that hopeful note, but thank you.